The meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah, I think we're getting connected here. Give us a second. For all of you out there waiting patiently for us, we're trying to get all of our technical ducks in a row, which can be an issue for us ladies to do that sometimes. So it looks like everything's up and working. So I want to say welcome to all of you who are watching. And yeah, I got to turn down the sound here because what happens is I hear myself twice and that's confusing. So everyone, welcome to Lunch and Learned. I'm Cynthia Martin, your host, and I have a guest host with me as well. Pat's my dear friend, Patsy Shreve. We're going to be doing these Lunch and Learns together. And so I just wanted to pop in today and we wanted to start doing these on a regular basis because we feel like God has given us gifts and it's our job to give out of what he's given to us. So today I wanted to talk about the topic of being stuck and getting unstuck. So I'm going to go ahead and tell a story and then Patsy's going to jump in just a few minutes so you can kind of get the idea. And I have a personal example that I want to talk about as well. So my father passed away a couple years ago, but one of the things that my father and I used to do is watch Westerns. I don't know if you guys are Western watchers, but I know a lot of Westerns because I spent a lot of time watching Westerns with my dad when I was growing up. And there's quite a few Westerns in which you'll see a scenario where there's a chuck wagon. If you know what those are, that's the cook store wagon, whatever, that follows whoever's out in the range. And especially if they're herding cattle. And so in typical Western fashion, the chuck wagon will get stuck. It'll get bogged down in some mud somewhere. And I want to talk about how that relates to our life and give you the picture. Just think about a chuck wagon stuck somewhere in the mud. It might be a little bit corny and a little bit of a strange example for women, but it is what it is. It's out of things that I remember. But what you remember is the cowboys would have to get down in the mud. They'd have to sometimes dig the mud away. Sometimes they would have to put things in it to be able to rock the wagon up out of that hole. Sometimes several of the cowboys would have to get to the back of the chuck wagon and push, and other people would be pulling on the horses. And it would be a great big to do in order to get that chuck wagon pulled out of the mud. And so today, what we're going to talk about is instances in our life in which we've gotten ourselves stuck, like the chuck wagon. Sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's not our fault. And so I wanted to talk about that because I think a lot of us find ourselves in that kind of a position in which we feel stuck. I know I've told my dear friend Patsy at times, I feel lost. You will use all kinds of words in order to explain that same picture or scenario. Patsy, you got any pictures that relate to being stuck?
Oh, absolutely. I think I know one thing that's really important when I feel stuck is to find a place where I can quiet myself and become unstuck and to think and process why I got here, and one of my places, my favorite place is the beach. So one of the things that happened to me recently when I went to the beach is it was very crowded because they had just recently opened up the beaches here in Alabama. And I went down there to find a parking spot. And of course, all the parking spots were taken. So there was an empty lot right next door to the parking lot. And I thought, okay, I'll just park there. So I drove in and I thought, oh, gee, the sand's kind of soft here. But I thought, well, there's cement and there's sand, and as long as no one parks behind me, I'll be fine because I'm on the concrete, and so I should be fine. Well, of course, what always happens is somebody comes and parks behind me, which had to change my whole plan of action, and I had to problem solve to figure out how in the world I was going to get out of that situation. Now, it was my choice to park there. It was my decision to park there. I could have parked someplace else, but I kind of weighed the options and thought, it's not a problem. No problem. I can get out of this situation. No problem at all. And so I ended up having to try to back around this car that was parked behind me, and of course, getting stuck in the sand. My wheels are turning and turning, and I'm going, oh, great, now what do I do? Here I am, stuck, trying to figure out how to get out of my situation. And of course, there's multiple ways. I'm sorry, what, Cynthia? I didn't hear your comment. Of course, I had to think about what I had to do. And so what you have to do is when you get stuck is try to figure out how to get out of your situation. And there were multiple ways. I could have just kept spinning my wheels and stay there and spin and get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that wouldn't get me anywhere. But finally decided to rock back and forth and back and forth and back and forth in order to get out of that situation. So I had to move forward and back and forward and back and forward and back. And I did get unstuck eventually. It took some time, but
So I think one of the points as that you're making is that you got there by yourself. Sometimes we get stuck on our own. Sometimes it's a choice we've made. Sometimes a good choice. Sometimes it's no choice of ours at all. I mean, we find ourselves. Other circumstances happen. This morning, go ahead.
Sometimes it's other people's choices that get you into that situation, like the car that parked behind me. So sometimes it's not even our own. I could have gotten out quite easily if that car hadn't parked behind me. So sometimes it's people's choices.
Right. Another circumstance got behind you. And so this morning, I do a short podcast called Daily Devotion, in which I do Monday through Friday. I spend 15 minutes or less. That's my promise. Sometimes I run over, but my goal is to do 15 minutes or less in which we're reading the Bible one chapter at a time. And so I'm in Leviticus. Leviticus is not exactly an exciting piece of scripture. And so I got myself stuck because I was reading a version of the Bible that I didn't like. And I did it at first, I did it on purpose because it made me dig, but it became stressful to me to do this because I didn't like the version and it didn't read the way I wanted it to. So I would always go and pull out another one and do a bunch of study to try and figure out how it was said. And then I got to Leviticus chapter 18. Leviticus chapter 18 is about sexual relations. And the whole chapter is about that. That is not a comfortable chapter to discuss on a podcast. So did I kind of get myself into that? Yeah, because I said we were going to go chapter to chapter. And I've really been hating Leviticus. The first part of Leviticus I loved, but starting around 15, 16, I got really stuck because I thought this is just dragging on. But I had to stop, and I did. I stopped for a few days to determine, okay. And I think that's the point is we're saying is when we get to a place where we're stuck, we call it stuck, we're confounded, we're frozen, we're lost, all those different, whatever has happened to you, an emotional thing has happened to you. When we get divorced or our husbands leave us or we, decide the marriage is broken, we're stuck, we're in a place or we're trying to make decisions, whether that be momentous or small things, but we have to stop. Just like you said, I have to stop. And I think it's important that we remember that when we get in place, whether it's our fault or not our fault, or, even if we're not discussing fault, it is where we are. It is where we are. And we need to stop and think about that. And we need to sometimes make some changes. We need to recognize that there are some barriers that have us trapped where we are. And maybe it's a habit. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's something that that we've gotten ourselves into that that we need to get out of. And what I want to talk about first of all is that if we was to look at getting unstuck in a few steps, the first step would be to just stop. And you could say, well, I'm stuck. I am stuck. But do you know how many times I'm stuck that I'm still running around and trying to figure out what to do? Or I go into escape, which first escape is for me is reading. Or I go and do all these other things, but I don't face the problem or the obstruction. How do you handle that, Patsy, when you get stuck?
Well, it just depends on the situation. But I think most of the time I sit and try to evaluate, how did I get here? how can I retrace my steps to get back out of here? And what do I do now that I'm here? Again, problem solving. I
Right.
think part of it is too losing our pride. I think about when
Huge.
I drove a 29-foot trailer and tried to park it on my own, and I hadn't had that much experience doing it, but I had done it a few times, so I felt fairly confident in being able to do it. Well, I had back forward and back and forward and back and forward and back, and there was this older gentleman just standing there watching me back up and go forward and back up and go forward and back up and go forward and missing the spot every time. And so finally, he kind of moseyed over to the car and the truck and said, "Ma'am, would you like some help?" And now then I had a choice to make. I could accept his help and lose my pride and say, "Yes, I need help," or I could say, "No, I'll do it myself. I can do it myself. I've done this before." But I chose to let him do it because I knew he could do it probably way more efficiently than I could. And so he jumped in, backed it right in, and I just thanked him profusely for helping me. So sometimes we need help from and support from others
Yeah.
to help us figure out what the problem is or how to get out of that situation, how to get unstuck.
I think part of that leans to the fact or the topic of being vulnerable. Sometimes we don't want to be vulnerable. We
Right.
don't want to let anybody know that, hey, I'm stuck here. And
Mhm.
and then that for me jumps off to another place, which was has always been an issue for me, is being able to trust people.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important that we be vulnerable, but we pick the right people to be vulnerable with, and
Yeah,
we pick the right people that we can trust, um, that will help us in our journey.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Because you have to trust the person in order to open up and be vulnerable to them and to be
It,
willing to trust them.
otherwise we get in another stuck situation.
Right.
For
Exactly.
sure, for sure.
Exactly.
And I can jump off and go in so many directions with this, because being vulnerable is scary.
Hmm.
Letting down our pride, stopping and trying to evaluate, taking a look around us and figuring out, okay, one of the things as Christians we'll always say, is this God testing me? Is this a trial? Is this something that I need to repent for? Is this something that I just need to, buckle down and blast on through? And so I think there's a lot of questions involved. And the first step, as we said, is to stop. The second step is to take a look at the barrier.
Hmm.
And then the third step is, can call it self introspection or God introspection, in which we ask him to come in and shed light on our situation. And I know, Patsy, we talked about this beforehand, because I was telling you about the story of the four lepers,
Hmm.
in which there were the four lepers, and Samaria, in the city in which they lived, was under siege. It was serious famine. Like, people were eating donkey heads and disgusting things, and we don't even want to go through all of the things, the evil things that they were doing, trying to stay alive, because the king of Syria had brought his entire army and had encamped himself around Samaria. And so there's these four lepers, and they're sitting at the gate, and they're looking. These people are stuck. They're seriously stuck. They're what are they going to do? First of all, they're lepers. So that kind of limits what they can do, and we as women sometimes will say, well, what can I do? I'm a woman. What can I do because I'm young? What can I do because I'm old? What can I do because I don't have this vivacious personality? What can I do? Just like the lepers, what could they do? They're just four lepers. And so as the story goes on, and this story is found in 2 Kings 6 and 7, but as the story goes on, these four lepers, they decide, hey, they start doing the introspection, right? They start saying, well, we got some choices, because we always have a choice. There's always a choice. Um, and so they start looking at their choices, and they start saying, you know what, we could go in the city. We know we're lepers, but at least we'd be with our people. We'd be in community. We'd die with them, but we could go in there. We could sit right where we are, and we'd be the first ones to get picked off. Maybe if we went in the city and we're with them, and I'm ad-libbing it here, what they're thinking, but maybe if I went in the city and I'm with people, maybe they'll see that I'm a leper and they'll leave me alone, but at least I'll be with people. And I wouldn't be the first one that, maybe their bloodlust or their killing spree would be over by the time they got to me. Or, we could do something else. We could surrender and go out to the enemy's camp. And so if you know the story at all, we know that these lepers made the choice to surrender, and they went out to the enemy's camp, and God had chased away the enemy, and there was all this food and all the provisions that everyone needed inside the city was actually out at the camp. God had made a way for them miraculously. So I think that's one of the things that it's important that we see, that there's some time that we need to stop and ask God, shine your light on this. Help me to see the different choices that I have, because we're not always able to see the choices. What do you say, Patsy?
That is so true. That's why I said, like, I like to go to the beach, because it's a quiet place. It's a place where I can just refocus. I can talk to the Lord. I sit on the beach. I just reflect on what is going on in my life. If there's a issue with being stuck or just not progressing, but again, he will show you and guide and direct you, but you have to listen and you have to quiet yourself, because I think, like Cynthia said earlier, we can just think we're listening and we're running around doing all this stuff and trying to fill our time and trying to figure it out and going over and over and over in our heads what our possibilities are, without just quieting our spirit and quieting ourselves and just relaxing and stopping to just listen and to evaluate, and to even making lists of pros and cons, or different solutions. What would be a good solution to how I can walk away from this, or if I need to press through. But like you said, sometimes we just have to press through. Sometimes it's just a matter of patience and waiting and pressing through and getting to the other side, that this too will pass. But sometimes we have to know what we're supposed to do, and we have to listen carefully to which way we should go.
Sometimes we have to change relationships. Sometimes we have to change places. We have to change habits. We have to change things, and change is not always comfortable. But in order to flourish, if God's moved on, we want to move on. I mean, we can look at this COVID-19 thing that we just went through and that we're still kind of finishing up on, and who knows if it'll come back, is that we had to change our way of life. Now we were stuck. And so we had to make a choice. Am I going to do life differently? Or, I mean, really, what else, what else are we going to do? Those of us who worked, or those of us who were doing ministry, we had to come up with a new way to communicate,
right,
which I have always loved, because it works for me, because I've always been online. But Patsy, one of the things that I wanted to mention that I think it's important that we realize and we recognize is, I talked about the importance of have people that you can trust.
Mhm.
And so, jokingly, but not jokingly, I called you a few weeks ago over something that I was wrestling with, because you have a totally different perspective than I do. And we, over the years, have really learned to respect each other's judgment and respect each other's view, because I know that I have a limited view. I mean, I would like to say that this isn't true, but we all have our own blinders on.
Absolutely,
We
yeah.
can only see experiences through our own experiences.
Mhm.
And so I am a pusher and a runner througher and a rammer and I'm going to do it this way type person. That's my personality, kind of the bottom line person. But yet again, there are times when I know, it's the Holy Spirit will say to me, there's more to the picture. And not that my view is wrong, but there's more to the picture. And so, even recently when I was talking about the government of denominations and all of that, and I have some pretty strong views on how I feel churches or denominations or our gatherings should be functioning. And but I knew that I was being pretty hard nosed. And so I called you, and I'm not even sure if you remember. I think you probably remember. And we were talking about it, and you brought the aspect of community, because that's not something that I even think about. I always think later, oh, that was nice, but it doesn't occur to me the importance of community. So I want to tie that back to what we're talking about, is that we need another person to help us at times, to give us another view. If we keep hitting the same wall, we keep hitting the same problem. Sometimes we need another view.
Mhm.
What do you say?
Absolutely. Because we can have limited perspective, and we're looking at things through our own filters and through our own way of dealing with things. And if it's not working, if what you're trying is not working, then you definitely need to try a different way. But sometimes we don't even know what to do or what to try because all we've known is one way and one perspective. So we call out to our people that we trust, our people that we know, that we trust, that we know that they will give us straight answers, not just agree with us, but to give us straight answers and to help us get over that hurdle. Because a lot of times then you will look at it from a totally different angle. It's kind of looking at that gem and looking at it from all the different facets that it has. There's all different facets to one gemstone, and you're only maybe looking at one side of that gemstone and not turning it over to see all the other colors and perspectives that it has. And so you need some help to be able to focus and look at the other side and go, oh yeah, I really never considered that. And that might work.
And I think that it's wisdom. Of course, I would say that because it's my idea, but being silly. But, I remember telling someone once that they told me, well, that's not the truth. And I said, well, if that's not the truth, me, get my head going. I get my head going. I got a little attitude. I said, well, if that's not the truth, you're going to have to tell me what truth is, because this is my truth.
Mhm.
And that is so perfect for the topic that we're talking about, is that sometimes we have a truth. It
Mhm.
might not be based on God's word truth, the
Mhm.
facts, the truth, the God's truth, but it's our truth. And
Absolutely.
sometimes we need some adjustments in the way that we're looking and seeing things.
Mhm. I agree 100%. And sometimes we just cannot see it. We
Mhm.
cannot see it until someone else brings light to that. And even when they do, sometimes we still have to process it because we don't want to agree. We don't want to believe that that could be a possibility or that could be our way out. And so sometimes God will use that, and the Holy Spirit will use it to focus and refocus us and to speak to us and to guide and direct us in that way, so that we can see clearly, so that we can have those blinders taken off, so that we can see the big picture rather than just our narrow vision, like you said
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah. I'm thinking back so many times in my life, places where I've gotten stuck because I'm not wounded like I was.
Mhm.
And so it's easier for me to call people or to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I'm just stuck right now. I don't got it. This is bugging me. I don't like it.
Mhm.
Um, and just have my little, fall apart and crybaby tantrum fit when I'm trying to figure it out. I don't like this. I don't want to move. I don't want to change. I want it to be this way, and it's not. And I'm okay with that in a certain extent, because I know that God has always been faithful to me.
Mhm.
He has always led me out when I really want the truth, and he will send me the truth, and I will get to a place where not only will I not just do it because, but I'll really realize this was the best choice. This is the right choice. This is because I'm going with God.
Mhm.
When he moves on or he changes direction, the cry of my heart has always been, God, I want to go where you are. Even if I don't like it, I'm going with you, because I found if I'm with him, it's a better place for me,
Right.
for sure. So, um, when you're wounded, though, trying to make those decisions are a lot harder, because you don't know what someone else has put on you. You don't know if it's something where you need to stand your ground, where you need to find who you are. There's just so many parts and pieces to being stuck,
Right.
and all the alternatives that could be available that sometimes we can't see, you
Mhm.
know? Back to the story in Second Kings is that starts in Second Kings 6, but then there's a kind of a little story about Elisha prophesying to the king, and he said that by this time tomorrow, the food will be being sold for very inexpensively in the city. And I think it was the captain of the guard, said to him, even if God could open up the floodgates of heaven, how could that happen? Oh my gosh. I have been in that situation. I remember telling someone at the time, well, that's impossible. Do you expect at the time I was living in Michigan, Consumers Power, that was the electric company, to give us a free bill. And lo and behold, we got our electric bill and there had been a mistake and we didn't have a bill that month. I mean, it was like the next day. So God was saying to me, yes, I can do it if you'll just let me. You know, we have such a short-sighted when we're stuck in a problem and we're angry and we're mad and we're hurt and it's not working out the way we want it to.
And that's where
Yeah.
faith comes in, to believe God, to trust. He's seen you through before, to hang
Mhm.
on to those anchor points that you know he's seen you through before. He will do it again. Even though this time you don't see a way out or you don't see a solution, you have to, sometimes it just gets down to bare faith. Okay, God, you did it before, you'll do it again.
Yeah. And and you know, we just went all over with this topic today, but it's really being stuck, being lost, being trapped, being all of those feelings, whatever that word is, that where you get to. And mine is always I'm lost. I feel like I'm lost again. I've lost my way.
Mhm.
But many years ago, I didn't have a history with
Mhm.
God to say
Mhm.
he's faithful. I couldn't even trust God. I had to build that. And he started out with those kinds of experiences to show me, I helped you with that one. I
Mhm.
helped you with this one. I got you out of this one. You had to change, but we made a way, or I made a way and you followed. And now I have a whole slew, a toolbox per se, or a whole bag of experience on which is I can think back on and call upon. God, you've never failed me. I see in the hard place that you've helped me get through when
Mhm.
I've had to allow myself to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
um, when I've had to reach out for help. And so I think the last point that we want to make today is, you know, we talked about stopping, making sure that we stopped. We talked about, I think I mentioned it as self introspection, but taking the time to look inside and inviting God to come in and look inside and take a look at where you are, like you called it. Problem solve and going down and evaluating and tearing apart and asking God to show us. And then, you know, there comes a point where we have to once get either choose to get help somehow, whether that's with another person or Holy Spirit or a book or some sort of other avenue of video, but we have to make a choice and then we have to go with the choice.
Right.
Because I've seen people make a choice, but then they're still behooving the
Mhm.
last way. Well, I'm going, but I don't like it. The way it was is better than the way it is now. Instead of embracing what God has for them in the moment, I don't think you can ever be happy if you're always looking backwards.
Right.
Or even truly, if you're looking for happiness tomorrow, we should be able to be happy today in the circumstances we're in.
Yeah, that's contentment. And learning
Yeah.
to be contented no matter what circumstance you find yourself. And it's not always easy, but if you're always looking in the rear view mirror, and instead of looking forward to what God has in for you in the future, you can get into a big accident that way because you're not
Exactly.
focused on
Yeah,
what's going on, what's coming up, and what
exactly.
and your expectation. And that gives you contentment and peace when you're looking forward to the future. And even if you're stuck or you're lost, looking forward to the way out.
That God will provide it in some way, you
Absolutely.
know. Silly story, but I used to tell myself that when I have 4 daughters, so I was in labor 4 times, and I remember in labor telling myself, "No one has been in labor forever. It ends. It will. This too will end." You know, I mean, sometimes you have to look at that. This too shall pass. This too shall end. This shall move on. And I will make it through and I'm going to continue to follow after God. Sometimes it's just that. It really is. But our heart today was to share with folks out there that are stuck, that need encouragement, that need someone to say it's okay to be stuck. It's okay. I mean, it is what it is. It's a human condition. It is. We're just people made out of dirt. And God graciously came down and breathed his breath of life into us and sent his son to die for us. So now we have value again. But truly, that's all we are. And so it's okay to be stuck. The the not okay part is not moving on and not ever doing things with it. I know people who are still bemoaning the same problems 30 years later,
Mhm.
still chained to that person that that they've not forgiven.
Right.
We can go into all the different things that can keep us trapped.
Mhm.
All the anger that they won't let go of, all the pride, that you mentioned so eloquently, Patsy, all the different things, that they won't move forward because they won't let go of the pain, because the pain has now become their friend. The pain has now become their identity. They don't
Mhm.
know how to be anyone without being a victim.
Mhm.
And so my heart is for people who want to get out of the places that they're in, um, to provide hope, to provide a hand if they need it.
Yes.
And I know that's your heart too, Patsy, is to
Absolutely.
provide a hand for those who need help. So, Patsy and I are avid readers, both of us. And so, studiers, we have lots of materials. We're available should you need somebody. I jokingly say when I went for ministry, when I was really wounded, I went to somebody that I figured I'd never see again. I didn't want to ever see them again because I was going to tell them all my dirt, and I didn't want to, make sure I saw them when I went uptown. It was somebody way out of town. I drove way away so I could just leave all my stuff and I would just pour it all out, and I didn't have to worry about looking at them. Now they're the head of a network that I am somewhat connected to. So it didn't work. But, now I can laugh because I know I look back on my issues and the places where I was stuck. And I realized they weren't as awful as I thought they were, that big old ugly shame thing that I wore. So we're closing down here on quite a few minutes. I know we're hoping to keep these pretty short, less than 45 minutes ish, something like that. So we're over the 45-minute mark. But I wanted to, Patsy, is there anything that you'd like to say in regards as to us closing up and reaching out a hand?
Well, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there's no judgment.
Mhm.
We've all been there. We all understand. We all know the struggles because we've all had our own struggles. It may be not exactly the same as your struggle, but we've all struggled and we've all had successes and failures, and we've learned from those. And we're just here to help. All we want to do is see you free and see you thrive and to see you success and to draw closer to the Lord in your relationship with Him and with others.
Mhm. Exactly. And sometimes we have to make some adjustments. Sometimes you just need somebody to lock arms with you and say, hey, we'll just tear through this wall with you. And sometimes it's hard when we're hurting to figure out which one it is. So our hope today is that you enjoyed, and we brought you some value. Our ending for today is just that we're hoping and praying and encouraging you to step out of the place that you're in
Mhm.
and get the help that you need. Whether that's a book, whether that's prayer, whether that's just sitting down with God and figuring it out. And that's not a small thing when I say whether it's just, because sitting down with God and allowing him to speak to you is huge. But sometimes we can't even hear God. But in those situations, we're encouraging you to move past that place, to do what you got to do so that you can move on with God, so you can get everything that he has for you. And our final statement is just is that Patsy and I are available should you ever want someone to talk to, or you need someone to reach out a hand or pray for you, help you sound out the issues. That's what we do. That's what God created us for. That's the calling of our heart. Patsy's is a bit different from mine. Mine is setting captives free. Patsy's is about healing. And if you know her, that's her heart, and her heart is all that is to love and to heal. And mine is, I'm a warrior, baby. I'm here to help you get out and get those chains off and help you move on. So we hope you enjoyed today. We're going to be doing more of these, a few of these a week. We would love to hear your comments. Let us know if there was any aha moments during our talk today, and connect with us on social media. Send us an email. God bless you. We love you. Have a fabulous day.